When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Five Below means hot stuff, cool prices. Get the trends in your feed for way less. Candy, beauty, tech, room decor, and more. Plus extreme value finds in our 5 Beyond shop. Yup, you could say we're kind of a big deal. Shop in stores and fivebelow.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Two-Footed Podcast here on EPL Index. Now, before we kick things off today, I just want to share something with everybody. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Sky Bet. We've teamed up with Sky Bet because they truly understand what it means to be a fan. Sky Bet appreciates the length that people go through to support their team in all areas, whether you're a match-going fan or otherwise. And there's just no better fit for us right now than a partnership with the good folks at Sky Bet. So with that said, let's go. What's good, boys and girls? Today is Tuesday. It is the 18th of June. I hope you're all well and having yourselves a pleasant day. Weather update. It's grey. It's just grey. It's not raining, though. It's very, very grey. Not at all pleasant. Please excuse my voice. It doesn't sound particularly good today. But not to worry. We have a pretty concise podcast lined up today. We're going to talk about the Premier League fixtures, which have just been announced, and we'll have a look at the first few weeks of that. We'll have a look at the Euros. We will have a look at the next team on our list, and then there'll be some news and gossip, and we'll be done. So, Premier League season will begin 16th of August, 8 p.m, Manchester United, home to Fulham. That is our first game. Quite why that is our first game, I have absolutely no idea. Absolutely no clue why that game is on first. I understand that you're putting the champions on the Sunday 4:30 slot. I understand that the biggest team in the country are on at 12:30 on Saturday. But surely last season's runners-up, Arsenal, should get that... last season's runners-up Arsenal should get that opening slot. That would have been the better. Let's get into them first. So we get United versus Fulham. Then Saturday 12:30 we get Ipswich, their return to the Premier League, hosting Liverpool. So they get the big guest on their first game back in the Premier League, and that is of course on television. Then the 3 p.m. game, of which there are 4. Arsenal Wolves. I'd much rather watch Arsenal Wolves than United Fulham, personally. Arsenal Wolves should have been the 8 p.m. Friday. Fulham United is not a televised game. That's not a game you put on TV. Just isn't. Everton versus Brighton, which has been an interesting fixture in the last couple of years, given Sean Dyche's style does seem to flummox Brighton, but Brighton will have a new manager, and hopefully for their sake, they're a bit more solid defensively. We get Newcastle against Southampton, so that's the second of the newly promoted teams. And then we get Nottingham Forest versus Bournemouth. It's a pretty solid 3 p.m. slate. The late kickoff is West Ham versus Aston Villa at the London Stadium. That's a decent game. Looking forward to seeing that one. The early kickoff on the Sunday at 2 p.m. is Brentford versus Crystal Palace in a London derby. The 4:30 game, Chelsea versus Manchester City, which is undoubtedly the biggest game of the weekend. And then on the Monday night at the King Power, it's Leicester City versus Tottenham. So 2 of the 3 newly promoted teams are on TV. All 3 got tough fixtures. Ipswich get Liverpool, Southampton have to go to Newcastle, and Leicester get Tottenham. So not an easy start for those newly promoted teams. In match week 2, which we don't have television schedules yet for match weeks 2 and 3, which also take place in August, Bournemouth home to Newcastle, Brighton home to Manchester United, Liverpool home to Brentford, Tottenham home to Everton, Crystal Palace home to West Ham, Southampton home to Nottingham Forest, Wolves home to Chelsea, Fulham home to Leicester, Aston Villa home to Arsenal, which is surely going to be a televised game that weekend. That's a big one. And then Manchester City home to Ipswich. So Ipswich begin with Liverpool home and Man City away. The fixture makers have not given them the easiest route back into the Premier League. Southampton and Leicester have slightly easier games in week 2. Forest home for Southampton, Fulham away for Leicester. And then the final game for August, final game week for August, is the weekend of the 31st and 1st. Now, there might be a game on the 2nd, we'll wait and see. Nottingham Forest home to Wolves, Midlands Derby. Leicester home to Aston Villa, Midlands Derby, should be good. Chelsea home to Palace, should be a good game. Ipswich against Fulham. West Ham against Manchester City. Newcastle against Tottenham, that's a big one. Brentford against Southampton. Everton versus Bournemouth. Arsenal versus Brighton. And the big one of the weekend is Manchester United home to Liverpool. That's almost certainly the Sunday 4:30 game. So, we've got some big fixtures right off the bat. Match week 1, Chelsea versus Manchester City. Match week 2, Aston Villa versus Arsenal. And match week 3, Manchester United versus Liverpool. So I think, and Newcastle versus Tottenham, which is another good game. I would imagine Villa Arsenal and United Liverpool are the Super Sunday games for those respective weekends. So Liverpool have a pretty tough start. Ipswich away, 12:30 kickoff. Brentford home, and then Manchester United home. So Manchester United away. Arsenal, Wolves home, Villa away, Brighton home. Pretty tough start as well. Probably a little bit tougher than Liverpool. City, Chelsea away, Ipswich home, West Ham away. That's pretty tough too. And then Villa, the final team that finished in the top 4. West Ham away, Arsenal home, Leicester away. So no easy start for any of last season's top 4. Tottenham, who finished 5th. Leicester away. Everton home. Newcastle away. And then Chelsea wrapped it up with the 6th place finish. Obviously City at home, Wolves away, Palace at home. All fairly even, I think, across the board for the top 6 heading into this season in terms of the first 3 fixtures. We're just under 2 months away from the season returning, which, I mean, it's going to fly by. It really will. You won't know it, and we'll be counting down the days until that first game between Manchester United and Fulham. Given what's gone on at United this summer, and I'm looking forward to getting round to them, they're coming up quite soon on our walk through the Premier League teams. Given what's taken place already this summer, you'd have to imagine Ten Hag goes into the season under the microscope. Not necessarily internally, but certainly externally, in terms of the media, in terms of the fan base. Like, everybody, including himself, is aware and has acknowledged that United interviewed other managers. Now, Ten Hag's line that, well, they spoke to Thomas Tuchel and they decided they already had the better manager, best manager, I don't think is in line with the truth. I spoke to a journalist who covers United recently, and he outright said United have been turned down by multiple managers this summer. Like, United were not planning to stick with Ten Hag, but they've been turned down by multiple managers. And there's two reasons as to why. Number one, the salaries that they're offering are well below what the elite managers are earning at the top clubs. And number two, he said that the transfer spend at United is going to be reined in significantly, which is something I think everybody has expected, given how Ineos have operated with their other clubs. Jim Ratcliffe has been fairly open about the fact that the days of just wild spending are over, and the fact that their opening salvo for Jared Branthwaite was less than half whatever value him at does suggest that they're not going to spend big money this summer. If they could sell a bunch of players, then they could spend quite a bit. But it's going to be very hard for them to move players on. And I don't want to talk too much about it because I want to spend quite a bit of time on them, maybe tomorrow, the day after, whenever we get. I think it's tomorrow we're due to get to them. But yeah, he's on TV for his first game of the season, and then he's got Liverpool in game 3. So Ten Hag is, he's definitely going to be watched closely because they got Brighton in between as well. And if they were to start off with 2 or even 3 defeats in those 3 games, given what's just taken place this past season and what's happened this summer, it won't be long before people start to turn very vocally and very loudly against it. The newly promoted teams, I think, have been done a little bit dirty. They've been given tough runs to start the year, especially Ipswich, Liverpool, City away. Fulham at home is a game that they will look to win. I think it's one that they'll target to win. But it's still a very, very tough start to go Liverpool home and City away. For Southampton, as I said, Newcastle away first. Then Forest at home, and that's definitely one they're going to target to win. And then they go to Brentford, and potentially that's a drawable game. So they've got a bit of an easier go, well, significantly easier go, to be fair, than Ipswich. And then Leicester, Tottenham home for the opening game. You just don't know with Tottenham. And it's a Monday night. It's going to be a good crowd there under the lights. You figure that should be a pretty big occasion for Leicester. Then they go to Fulham, and then they play Villa home. So they get 2 of the top 5. Again, not quite as tough as Ipswich, especially considering that both of their games against top 5 teams are at home. But still a really, really tough start for Leicester. Right. Now, the Euros. The Euros are... I had been really enjoying them. I am really enjoying them. I have to say, I am enjoying them. But I was really surprised by yesterday's games. I was really surprised by the lack of quality from 2 teams that would have come into the competition quite fancied. So we'll get to them, but let's start with Romania. Mentioned on the pod yesterday that they had beaten Ukraine 3-0. Estancio scores a worldie. Marin scores a really good goal, and then Dragos gets the poacher's finish. Ukraine, though, immensely disappointing. And when we look at the team that they put out, you would expect them to have an advantage there. their 11, I would say, was significantly stronger. Lunin in goal, Zabarny, Matvienko, and Zinchenko at the back. You've got Stepanenko in midfield, who's a good player. You've got Sudakov as the 10, Shankov off the right, Dovbyk up front. All of these players had really good seasons. And Mudryk then off the left, just looking completely lost. Like, they also bring on Malinovsky, they bring on Yaramchuk, they bring on Chimchek, they bring on Yarmolenko, who's obviously well past his best, but, still knocking around. That's a really strong team. And yet they got absolutely dominated. They had 72% of the ball. They managed 2 shots on target. Romania had 5 shots on target from just 28% of the ball. They were really clinical, really aggressive. And their patterns of play on the counter, in transition, were so crisp and so clean. It was so impressive. So impressive. And I thought Radu Dragusin, who obviously owned by Tottenham now, hasn't been given many opportunities since going there. I thought he dealt really well with Dovbyk. Dovbyk was coming in off a sensational season in La Liga, where he won the Golden Boot, and he's just been battering centre-backs left, right, and centre all year long. And I thought Dragusin dealt with him brilliantly. I do really like Dragusin. I think he's a very, very good centre-back. There's part of me that really wishes Ange would go to a back 3 and go Dragusin, Romero in the middle, Van de Ven, which would free up Oro and Doig to play as wing-backs, which is what they both are by nature, and let them provide the width. And I think the Spurs team would lend itself really well to that. And then Maddison could play as an actual 10 in front of Papimatar Sarr and Bissouma, if Bissouma's at his best, or Bentancur would fit in there as well, to be less running to do. They'll probably look to add one in midfield this summer. I hope it's not Conor Gallagher, because I just don't like the fit of Gallagher into that mix. And then you play Son +1 up front. And it means that Kulusevski comes off the bench and all that kind of stuff. And that's fine. Like, that is fine. Kulusevski, Brennan Johnson, Richarlison, if he stays. There's your backup front 3. You've just got to find a 9. And then you buy some depth. Like, you're only looking for depth after you get that 9. Unless you want to upgrade on Bissouma, which, again, if that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine. But then he becomes a really good squad player. Him and Bentancur as your backup midfielders is about as good as you're going to get in the league. If they could find that defensive midfielder to play with Sarr, have those wing-backs, have that back 3. They've got a really good goalkeeper in Vicario. You'd only be looking at centre-backs. We'll talk more about Tottenham in a few weeks. But so impressed by Romania. Absolutely tremendous performance. Then we had a huge upset. Belgium 1, Belgium 0, Slovakia 1. Ivan Schranz with the only goal of the game on 7 minutes. Belgium probably a little bit hard done by with the goal that was disallowed. I thought it was an accidental handball by Openda, and he didn't score the goal, but he was being fouled. I thought he was being fouled. So that's why his hand touches the ball. I don't agree with the decision to disallow it. I understand that by the rules of the game, that's the right decision, but surely there has to be some space for common sense. There has to be some space for common sense in there. Now, look, I don't take anything away from Slovakia. They got their goal. They defended brilliantly. They didn't just sit back and gift Belgium possession. They did continue to attack. They did continue to cause problems for the Belgian backline. And by the way, Wout Faes, dear, oh dear, what a performance. Somebody please rescue Belgium from themselves. Zeno de Bast and Arthur Thiete is the easiest pair of centre-backs to pick for them. There's just no doubt about it. And you don't help matters when you play Yannick Carrasco as a left back, because he just isn't. And he's never going to be. Now, I understand that the squad is without a couple of players at the moment through injury, but you've got to do better than that. You've got to do better than that. Doku, lots of fancy dribbles, no real end product. Bakayoko came on, missed a sitter. Lukaku kind of stood around most of the game, did nothing, but did have the goal disallowed. Disappointed with KDB. Just not the caliber performance that we're used to from him, but he is now, 33, 34, so those magical powers maybe are coming to an end for him. In the final game then, France won, Austria 0. Max Wober scores an own goal on 38 minutes. Mbappe does really well in a tight space, beats his man, gets his cross in, and Wober is stooping to head of the clear and just deflects in. It's unfortunate. No question for me that France deserved the win. They were the better team, but Austria gave them a good game. I was really impressed with Niklas Sievold in midfield. He's, for me, a very, very impressive player. I think he's done a really good job developing through the Red Bull system. I'll be interested to see if there's clubs that show interest in him this summer. I always like watching Baumgartner, the number 10, plays for Leipzig as well. He's previously at Hoffenheim. He's another good player. You've got the old heads and Konrad Laimer and Sabitzer there for experience and just a little bit of control. I think Grilic is an excellent player. The issue for him has always been injuries. But he played for Hoffenheim this past season, and having been there and left to go to Ajax, it was a disaster. He went back to Hoffenheim, and he managed to stay fit most of the year and had a pretty good season. And, you know, he's another good player to add into that group. And then you've got Gregoric up front, who, again, is just a very, very solid player. Not sure he's going to get you a ton of goals, but he works really hard for the team. He links the play really well. He's involved in most of the good things that comes their way. Just a very unselfish player who puts team before himself. And he's done really well at Freiburg. Good to see him doing well for the national team. Defensively, I thought Danzo played well. And he's developed very, very well over the years. You would have some questions over the fullback pairing. McKenna wouldn't be for me. Wouldn't be a big fan of him. And Stefan Posch, to be fair, had a very good season this past year. For Bologna, I was trying to figure out was this his first year, but he was there on loan the year before. It was the year before on the loan that he had the really good year. But this season they had a lot of more team success. He's another one that was at Hoffenheim. Hoffenheim have done a great job at scouting Austrians over the years for whatever reason. I like the Austrian team. Like, there's a lot of talent in it. Obviously, they're currently without David Alaba. He probably could have gone to the competition, given he's back, but decision was made not to bring him, given he'd missed most of the season. Samson Baidu, the centre-back, who's at Red Bull Salzburg, he's the next one to keep an eye on for this Austrian team in terms of defenders. There's a couple of other good young midfielders there. If they can find a goal scorer, and I know they were hoping it would be Junior Adumo, who came through the Salzburg Academy like most of these. But he hasn't really clicked since moving to Freiburg. I don't think he scored for them all season, certainly not in the league. He might have got one or two in the cup. But he's the one they were hoping would really been a spark for them in attack, and it just hasn't happened as yet. It might still, but as yet it hasn't. And without him, there's not really enough goals in the squad. Bar Baumgartner, who's got like 15 and 40 caps or whatever. Arnautovic is well past his best, and I think most people would prefer not to see him play. I do very much like Patrick Wimmer, and I'll be curious to see if he plays more as the tournament goes along. I assume they went with a bit more of a defensive look against the French because they were expecting to have less possession, but maybe over the next couple of games where they're maybe playing, I know the Netherlands are a really good team, but they'll expect to beat Poland, I think. And maybe Patrick Wimmer gets some game time there because he's definitely one to watch. Very exciting player. Today then, we have just the two games. We've got a 5 p.m. kickoff, which I think should be a good one. It's Turkey versus Georgia. The Turks will be heavy favourites. I think this Georgian team, though, are being very much overlooked by a lot of people. And I think there's some players in that team that will cause problems for most countries they come up against. Obviously, everybody knows about Vicha, but there's a couple of others in that squad as well. Davidashvili, who's at Bordeaux, definitely one who's capable of being quite a significant game changer for them. I think he's one that people are really overlooking. And then you've got Mikatadze, who's at Metz, and he's another one that's really, really promising. And if those three, Kvic and those two boys, if they combine and it clicks for them, that could be a quite potent attacking group. I'll be really interested to see how they line up. I don't think the team's been announced yet. Let me have a look. No, team hasn't been announced yet. I'm really looking forward to this game. I really am. Now, the Turks are going to be no pushover at all. They're a good team. And they were in a group with Croatia, with Wales, with Armenia, and with Latvia. And they qualified top of that group. So, by no means are they going to be a pushover here. In that qualifying group, they beat Armenia away. They lost at home to Croatia. They beat Latvia away. They beat Wales at home. They drew at home with Armenia. Beat Latvia away. Beat Croatia away in a big shock. Then hammered Latvia at home. And then they drew in Wales. And, top that group with Croatia. Very, very impressive. A lot of good players in that Turkish squad as well. Players that have been around the top leagues in Europe. Zeki Çelik in France for a number of years, now playing with Roma. Mary Demiray was in Serie A for a number of years. You've got Yukuzlu, who's at West Brom, the decent player. Ergin Koku, not had a great season with Benfica, but really, really good player. Was excellent for Feyenoord the year they won the league. Arda Güler is potentially one of the next stars in the game. Yusuf Yaziki is a good player. He's been at Lille for a number of years. Altay Bayındır is the backup goalkeeper for Manchester United. Ahmet Can Kaplan, the young centre-back from Ajax, he hasn't been capped yet. He's one to keep an eye on, though, over the next couple of years. I think he's got a really good man-to-man marking side to him that, in the right system, could be vital. Who else have we got here? Stali Özkan, another very good midfielder. Now, it hasn't gone great for him at Dortmund. I wonder, under a new manager, if he might get more opportunities there. Mert Mulder, knocked around Europe for a number of years, spent time in Serie A, notably with Sassuolo. That's back at Fenerbahce now and seems to be playing good football for them. You've got Kenan Yildiz of Juventus, who's a big, big star in the making, along with Arda Güler. He's the future of Turkish football. And then you've got Yunus Akgün, who I was really impressed with when I saw him play for Leicester on loan this past year. Would like to see more goals in his game, but very inventive player, very safe in possession. Yeah, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of good homegrown players coming from Galatasaray, from Fenerbahce, both of whom have strong teams right now. Both of whom had excellent seasons. Obviously, Fenerbahce had a great season and somehow managed to miss out on the league. Galatasaray were just phenomenal this past year. They've been a little bit unfortunate. They've lost some key players to injury. Enes Ünal just signed for Bournemouth on a permanent deal after being there on loan. He's going to miss out due to injury. Ozan Kabak misses out due to injury, and Kagler Söyüncü misses out due to injury. And those would have been probably at least 2 starters from those 3 players. There's one other young player that I'm not overly familiar with, Kaliksoy of Besiktas, who I've heard his name mentioned a few times. People are saying he might be the goal scorer of the future in this national team. We'll wait and see. He certainly had a good season with Besiktas last year for his first full season. He's been capped twice, and we'll see how he goes, because if he is to be that main goal scorer and he's got Kenan Yildiz and Arda Güler supplying for him, that's potentially the attack boxed off long term. And I'm sure the Turks are always producing really, really talented players if they all click and if they all develop together and develop well. Then perhaps we're going to see Turkey become a lot more of a force in the coming years, which would be really good to see. I think the Turkish league is underrated. I think there's always talented players coming out of Turkey. The issue is, say like someone like Ridvan Yilmaz, just as an example, because I'm looking at his name here. At 18, he looked like he was going to be a star. By the time he leaves Besiktas at 21, that star has waned ever so slightly. Now, I've been quite impressed when I've seen him play for Rangers, but it's the Scottish Premier League. You know, another one is obviously Ozan Kabak. His biggest issue was he left Galatasaray too early, went to Stuttgart, then moved to Schalke. He's moved to clubs that are on the slide. Stuttgart were going down. Schalke were in a financial mess and potentially going down as well. And now he's at Hoffenheim, and I think he's actually been really good for Hoffenheim the last 2 seasons. So hopefully he can maintain that level and get back on the track that he was on as a young player, because he did look like he was set to be a top player. Abdul Kadir Al-Bomur of Hull is another one, and his issue is he stayed too long. There's got to be a sweet spot for when these players leave Turkey, either a number of games played or an age. I don't know what it's going to be or what it is. He's a fantastically talented player. I remember seeing him when he was 18, 19, and he just reminded me so much of Bernardo Silva. And now he's playing for Hull. He moved there in January. Now, nothing wrong with going to Hull, but that's not the trajectory that was predicted for him. People were talking about him going to Liverpool back when he was like 19, 20. So he's obviously just stayed too long, and that's kind of hampered his development as well. And if he'd moved to Galatasaray or Fenerbahce or Besiktas when he was 19, 20, maybe that would have helped him step up. But he stayed with Trabzonspor, the club that he grew up supporting, the club that he's from the region of. And it's kind of caused him to stagnate. And now he's not in the squad for the Euros. Cengiz Under is another one that never became what he was expected to be. Enes Ünal, I mean, I don't think he's become what people thought he would be either. Same with Söyüncü. Had a great first year with Leicester. Was one of the best centre-backs in the league that season when he came in to replace Harry Maguire. Was that his second? It might have been a second season there. The year he stepped into the team and replaced Harry Maguire, he was absolutely brilliant. And he's just declined ever since. Now, part of that has been managed by Brendan Rodgers, but part of it is also just that, for whatever reason, these players are not developing as well as they should. Our second game today is the 8 o'clock kickoff, and it's Portugal versus the Czech Republic. I don't expect much from the Czechs in this tournament, but then I didn't expect much from Slovakia, and they managed to beat Belgium. I don't think the Czech Republic will beat Portugal, but look, stranger things have happened over the years. There's a lot of talent in that Portugal squad, but as I said before, I just think they'll be held back by two things. Cristiano making it all about Cristiano, and the manager just not being very good. Looking forward to both games. The Turkey-Georgia game is actually the one I'm looking forward to more of the two of them. Largely just because I want to see interesting players that we don't watch all the time, and I want to see how Georgia do. I really want to see Kavica on this international stage. I think it's just incredible that this is one of the benefits of the 2014 tournament, which I'm willing to cede to, is that you do get to see players like him and Szoboszlai lead their nations to European Championships. And it's great because, we never got to see Ryan Giggs play an international tournament for Wales when he was carrying the load there. Never got to see Ian Rush, Right, back after the break. Right, welcome back. So, I was just going to do this as the 20 Premier League teams and then tack the newly promoted teams on at the end, but I figure I might as well just do it in alphabetical order. So Ipswich are actually up next, which pushes Liverpool and Leicester and United and City and et cetera back. Well, we're adding Leicester in obviously as well. So we have a quick look at Ipswich because what a season that they had. I mean, having just been promoted from League One in very, very impressive fashion, finishing second with the most goals scored and the best defensive record in the league. 3 points behind Plymouth, least defeats in the league as well. Kieran McKenna did a remarkable job in his first full season there, turning them around. And then to follow that up with just an outrageously good championship campaign, again scoring the most goals, again losing the least games, only finishing a point behind a Leicester City team that was full of players that had played in the Premier League. Now, their defensive record took a bit of a hit. They conceded 57 goals, which, if we pull up the table, 1, 2, 3. To be fair, 4 was the sixth best defense. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was the 7th best defense. So still not bad. Not bad. Still, an almost playoff level defense. But the best attack in the league. And the hardest team to beat in the league. An incredibly strong mindset. A team that just didn't really know when they were beaten. Having been promoted, they didn't spend a whole lot of money. They brought in Jack Taylor for an undisclosed fee. Probably $1 million, $1.5 million. Brought in Kieran Slicker from Manchester City, a young goalkeeper. Brought in George Hurst, who is the son of David Hurst, who was a big favourite of mine back in the 90s, playing for Sheffield Wednesday. George, his son, is now 25, and he's a good player in his own right, but he'd never found a home. And he landed at Ipswich on loan during their League One campaign, came in the January, did well, contributed to getting promoted. They signed him permanently on a fairly reasonable deal. He was playing pretty well, got injured, missed most of the second half of the season, which was very unfortunate. So he will be looking forward to bouncing back in the season ahead. They also brought in Axel Tuanzebe on a free. He had been released by Manchester United following the expiry of his contract. He'd obviously had loans with Aston Villa and Napoli, Stoke. He'd shown himself to be a pretty solid defender. I think he's a good player. And I was, very impressed by his spell at Villa in their promotion season out of the Championship. He didn't do great because he didn't get many minutes when they came up into the Premier League, which is why he got pulled back from that loan and shipped out to Napoli, where he just wasn't going to get minutes because they had a pretty strong defence at the time. The Stoke loan did not go well. He had a bunch of injuries, but it didn't go well. So when he joined Ipswich, initially on loan, initially on a 1-year contract, I think a lot of people were kind of skeptical of it, but he turned out to be a good signing for them. And Al Hamadi arrived from Wimbledon, from AFC Wimbledon, having banged in goals for them. He arrived in January. He spent 12 months at AFC Wimbledon, having stepped up from Bromley in the National League into League Two and scored 27 goals in 48 games. Now, he played 14 for Ipswich and scored 4, but, they were looking for a lot of contributors. They weren't just looking to have a main guy in attack. If we look at their squad statistics over the last year, Sladke played 46 games, played every league game. Christian Walton was brought off the bench in the final game just to give him a run out and also to give Sladke a standing ovation as he left the field. Leif Davies, the left back that came in from Leeds, he was outstanding, played 43 times. Luke Wolfenden played 41 games at centre-back. Cameron Burgess played 39 games at centre-back. And then Harry Clark played 35 games, 25 starts, and 10 sub-appearances. Cameron Burgess is an interesting player. He's sort of bounced around for a number of years, having come through the Fulham Academy. Scottish by birth, Australian international. Loans to Ross County, Cheltenham, Oldham, Bury. Then he went to Scunthorpe, established himself there, seemed to fall out of favour, was loaned out to Salford, then went to Accrington Stanley and had a good season there. And then Ipswich signed him and he's come up through the divisions with them and he's been absolutely vital to the growth of Ipswich Town over the last couple of years. Luke Wolfenden's another one that's kind of gone under the radar, but he came through their own academy. He had a couple of loans, one at Bromley, one at Swindon. But he's established himself and really made one of the positions his own. So, assuming there's not massive change, and I don't think there will be massive change, they might try and come up with a lot of the same group, similar to what Sheffield United did when they came up under Chris Wilder the first time. Well, Chris Wilder only brought them up once, but when they came up under Chris Wilder, and they had pretty much the same defence they'd had in the Championship, and they just trusted it to work. And to their credit, it did in that first year. The problem was they didn't make the changes quick enough when things started to go badly. They also had Brandon Williams in on loan from Manchester United. Now, he didn't play a ton. 8 starts, 7 sub-appearances. But I wonder if they might try and keep him. In midfield, Wes Burns played 35 games. Sam Morsey played 42. He's a good player. I do quite like him. 9 caps for Egypt. He's an experienced player, born in Wolves, but has played his entire career in England. Port Vale, where he came out of the academy, having been released by Wolves. Chesterfield, Wigan, Barnsley, Middlesbrough, and now at Ipswich. Just a very clever player. Reads the game really well. Doesn't try and do anything fancy on the ball. Just keeps things ticking over. Omari Hutchinson was outstanding for them. 20 starts in the league, 24 sub-appearances. They were trying to manage his fitness. He scored 10 goals. Quite like Sarmiento there on loan. I'd be interested if they'll keep him as well. And Massimo Longo is a good player, another Australian that's there. He's another interesting one that is 31, so he's a little bit past his best, but had a very, very good season for Ipswich this past year, having joined from Middlesbrough, where things hadn't gone particularly well for him. Not really sure what had happened, that Borough signed him and then binned him off a couple months later, cancelled his contract. We'll see how he does if he gets many opportunities in the Premier League. In attack, Conor Chaplin and Nathan Broadhead took on most of the goal-scoring burden with George Hurst out. They also had Kiefer Moore there on loan, and he contributed quite a bit as well. But they got 13 from Chaplin, 13 from Broadhead, 7 from Hurst, 7 from Moore, 4 from Al-Hamidi, and 3 from Caden Jackson. So, when you add in the goals they got from midfield, 6 from Burns, 3 from Sarmiento, 3 from Luongo, and 10 from Hutchinson. Like, the goals were coming from all over, which is kind of what you want. And, for players like Conor Chaplin, who was phenomenally good in their promotion campaign from League One, he scored 26 goals. Some attacking midfield. Then to step up and do as well as he did in the Championship with 13, very, very impressive. And then Broadhead, he's a good player. He is a good player, but can he do it in the Premier League? That's going to be the question. Came through at Everton, loans at Burton, a loan at Sunderland, which actually went really well. I was surprised he didn't stay there. The loan at Wigan didn't go great, but joined Ipswich in halfway through their League One campaign, played a big part in keeping them up, and was really good at getting them up, and then really good in getting up again. So very curious to see how this squad does. Like, without wanting to sound rude, they kind of need one of everything. Like, they could probably do with 2 defenders, starting caliber defenders. They could probably do with a new goalkeeper. Like, Gladkey's done really well there, but he is 33, and there's a limit on how good he's going to be. Now, he signed a new contract only recently, but I still do think there's potentially a need to upgrade. Like, it's worth remembering, in their League One campaign, he wasn't the first choice goalkeeper. Christian Walton was. Walton himself is 28. He's never played in the Premier League. So he was at Brighton for a long time, but he was always out on loan. He's solid, but it takes more than solid in the Premier League. So that might be a position to look at. I think 2 defenders, at least 1 in midfield, and at least 1 up front. I do think they're going to have to be pretty busy and pretty aggressive this summer. Now, they might take the Luton approach and buy really good Championship players who, if they go down, they can keep and be in a really good position for another promotion attempt. That might be the approach, and in doing that, you can bank quite a lot of money from your year in the Premier League, and there's absolutely no shame in that, as long as you're doing it for a purpose. As long as you're doing it for the purpose of, we're going to come up, bank the money, but build a really good Championship team. We're going to go down, and then we're going to try and come back up, and when we land in the Premier League the second time, we intend to stay. That's the right way to approach it for me, if you're going to go that route. Not the Norwich approach of, we're going to come up, go down, come up, go down, come up, go down, and then we're just going to fall into obscurity. That just doesn't work for me. Ipswich's season, anyway. So in terms of the FA Cup, they beat AFC Wimbledon in round 3, 3-1 away from home, and then they lost at home to Maidstone in the big upset in round 4. In the EFL Cup, they beat Bristol Rovers 2-0 in the first round. They beat Reading on penalties in the second round, and they beat Wolves in the third round before losing at home to Fulham. In the league, they started off brilliantly. They won their first 3 games. They beat Sunderland away, they beat Stoke at home, and they beat QPR away. Then they lost at home to Leeds, one of the favourites for promotion, who obviously are not coming up. Then they beat Cardiff, they beat Sheffield Wednesday, they beat Southampton, and they beat Blackburn. So you're talking 7 wins out of 8, which in a normal year would have had them top of the league. Instead, they were second because Leicester had started so well. They draw with Huddersfield. That's fine. It's away from home. You know, ideally you'd be beating them because Huddersfield were not good and got relegated. But, you know, it is what it is. They win 4 in a row then, beating Hull at home, beating Preston, beating Bristol, and beating Plymouth. Then back-to-back draws. Again, both very disappointing in a lot of ways because both Birmingham and Rotherham were relegated. So, you know, you're 15 games into the season. You've got 1 defeat. That's fine. And it's fine, again, to lose against Leeds because they were one of the heavily favoured teams. The 3 draws will have been disappointing because they're 3 bad teams. But the fact of it is they'd won their other 11 games, which is an absolutely magnificent start for a team newly promoted. And by that point, 15 games in, Ipswich had achieved their goal, which was to stay in the championship. Off the back of the draws against those teams, they beat Swansea. Then they lose their second game away to West Brom. Again, that's fine. That's a playoff team, so no issue there. Then they beat Millwall, beat Coventry, beat Middlesbrough and beat Watford. And again, in a normal season, you'd be looking at that, 21 games in, 2 defeats, 3 draws and 16 wins, and you were saying they have to be top, surely. But they were second because Leicester were still having this unbelievable run. Then they hit their wobble for the season. But when you look at the results, it's actually not nearly as bad as it sounds. Like you say to somebody, oh, they've only won 1 in 9. Sounds terrible. But they only lost 2 in 9. And they drew 6. And those draws were Norwich in the Old Firm, Leicester, who were top. QPR is disappointing because they were pretty poor. Stoke is disappointing because they were pretty poor. Then they beat Sunderland. Then they draw away to Leicester. So they got 2 draws against Leicester, good results. And then they draw with West Brom, again, a playoff team. They lose to Leeds, which, you know, it's disappointing. The scoreline is disappointing. They lost 4-0. But losing away to Leeds is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Then they lost to Preston, which Preston were in and around the playoff mix for much of the season. Now, they weren't, I don't think, ever in the playoff, but they end up finishing 10 points off. I'm fairly certain they spent pretty much the entire season in the top 10. I could be completely wrong about that, but yeah, they had a 5-week span outside the top 10, only 1 week outside of the top half. They were in the playoff for the first 17 weeks of the season, basically, and they were 8 until they lost their last 5 games in a row. So they actually had a chance at a playoff berth with 8 games left. With 5 games left. So Preston were a decent team. No real shame in losing to them. The other loss in that run, like I said, was Leeds. So you've lost twice to Leeds, once to West Brom. That's all playoff teams. And then Preston, who, if not for a dreadful end to the season, would have been a playoff team. Then they bounced back and they win 6 in a row. And they dropped, by the way, to 4th, which, other than being 6th for 1 week after match day 4, 4th is the lowest they were all season. But they rattle off 6 wins in a row. Millwall away, Swansea away, Rotherham home, Birmingham home, Plymouth away, and Bristol City at home. That's a really good 6-game run. Then they went and they played Cardiff, and they lost. Cardiff finished the season in 12th. Cardiff are not particularly good. They weren't particularly good this past season. They spent large chunks of it in the bottom half. And when they beat Ipswich, which was match day 37, they were a top half team. Then they win 3 in a row off the back of that. They hammer Sheffield Wednesday, they beat Blackburn, and then they beat Southampton. Then they lost to Norwich, playoff team, in the Old Firm. And then they drew 3 in a row with Watford, Middlesbrough, and Hull. That was their chance to top the league. They had the opportunity to win the league going into that run. They were top. The defeat to Norwich and then the 3 straight draws actually dropped them to 3rd. Then they won their last 2. They beat Coventry. Leeds messed up, threw it away, and going into that final day, Ipswich knew they were up. They just had to beat Huddersfield to secure, and they did. They beat them 2-0. So no losses against teams in the bottom half all season. Only 6 losses all season. Probably a couple too many draws against teams they should have been beating, like Birmingham, like Rotherham, like Huddersfield, like QPR at home. Stoke away, fair enough. That's okay. Watford home, Borough home. They should have been winning those games. But overall, you can't really look at the season and say, well, that's a bad result. Yeah, that's a really disappointing one. Because overall, like, other than losing 4-0 to Leeds, they were really, really strong all year. They only lost 2 games by more than 1 goal, which was West Brom away and the Leeds game. They found ways to score so regularly, it was very, very impressive. You're only looking at 5-6 games all season where they didn't score. Out of 46, that's a really good achievement. And if they can keep that habit in the Premier League, they're going to be tough. They're going to be tough. They're not going to be flash. They're not going to be fancy. They play good football. And they work really, really hard. Kieran McKenna has those boys working really, really hard. And he is the real star here. Like, he's their most valuable asset without the shadow of a doubt. And he could have written his own ticket this past summer. He could have gone to Chelsea. He could have gone to Brighton. He probably could have had the United job. Instead, he signed a new 4-year contract to carry on the work. In the past 2 seasons, they've accumulated 194 points and scored 193 goals. And they're the first team since Southampton in 2012 to do back-to-back promotions and land in the Premier League. By all accounts, he is an absolutely elite football mind. And you would have to wonder how it is that Manchester United let him walk out the door. How did that happen? You had Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in charge. How have you allowed this to happen? Like, he left United in December of 2021. You had just appointed Ralph Rangnick as your interim manager. Why didn't you appoint Kieran McKenna as the interim manager and see how it goes? Ralph Rangnick hadn't been a full-time manager in a decade. He'd managed 2 seasons with Leipzig, both of which he was sporting director for, and by his own admittance, didn't take care of the day-to-day running of the team. Wasn't the coach. Was just the manager. Had a team of coaches coaching the team. His last full-time job was at Schalke, which was a disaster, and he left after 23 games because he was exhausted. He hadn't really been a manager since he left Hoffenheim in 2011. And United, that was the very start of 2011. And United decided that at the end of 2021, he was the guy they were going to appoint. Despite the fact they were crying out for sporting director, And he would have been a really good fit. And McKenna would have been the ideal head coach. And United decided, no, we won't do that. We're going to prick around some more. Well, I guarantee they regret that decision now. And Kieran McKenna has done nothing but flourish. And I hope he continues to do so. And I'll be back after the break. Right, welcome back. So, as you will have heard at the start of the podcast, today's episode is brought to you by Sky Bet. And thanks to Sky Bet, we have some new data from their latest focus group, which is centering around England at Euros. So, question 1. Who do you think should start? Now, bear in mind, these have been answered after watching England versus Serbia. Who do you think should start on the left wing for England versus Denmark? Phil Foden, Anthony Gordon, Cole Palmer, or Eberechi Eze. Now, bear in mind, only 2 of them actually play that side. Phil Foden, who stank the place out against Serbia, 39%. Anthony Gordon, 22%. Cole Palmer, 21%. And Eberechi Eze, who's the best left-sided player they have in the squad, 19%. Now, Anthony Gordon is who I would pick because of his pace. But if I wanted the best player available who actually plays that position, Eberechi Eze will be the one. Who do you think should start in midfield with Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham versus Denmark? 43% said Trent. 25% said Mainu. 24% said Gallagher. And only 7% said Adam Ward. So only 7% of the people responding to this actually have a breeze what they're talking about. This is the best one. Who do you think should start at left back for England versus Denmark if Luke Shaw is not fit to play? Joe Gomez or Kieran Trippier? 74% said Kieran Trippier. He was abysmal against Serbia. Abysmal. He doesn't play left back. Joe Gomez does play left back. Was great there for Liverpool this year. This is even better. Do you think Gareth Southgate's tactics are too passive? 65% said yes. But the same 65% that said yes are the same people that said he should start Foden in midfield, Foden on the left, Trent in midfield, and Kieran Trippier at left back. So they're saying they want what he's done, but that he's too passive. Absolutely incredible stuff. And then finally, will England win Euro 2024? Yes, 13%. 13%. You're picking Kieran Trippier to play left back. So of course the answer is no, they won't win it. That's why at least 87% said no. But most of them said pick Kieran Trippier at left back. Most of them said to play Phil Foden left wing and play Trent in midfield, rather than playing England's actual best team, which picks itself. Pickford in goal, Trent at right back, Guehi and Stones in the middle, Gomez at left back, Rice and Norton in the midfield, either Saka or Foden on the right, Bellingham as the 10, Gordon on the left, and Kane up front. The team picks itself. It's perfectly balanced, regardless of whether it's Saka or Foden. It's ideally balanced. Like, that team should win the Euros. And yet, only 13% think they will. Yeah. Right. Let's move on to the news for today. Kylian Mbappe sustained a broken nose during the France win over Austria, and he will play with a mask for the rest of the tournament, which is just going to make him look more and more like a Ninja Turtle, isn't it? Like, let's be honest, he's going to look more and more like Michelangelo, and that's a good thing. Ninja Turtles are awesome. Phil Foden needs to get personality back for England. I don't really know what that means, but he's never really performed well for England. I think if you look at his England career, it's largely very disappointing. So, I'm not sure getting personality back is really going to help. It appears to be absolutely piss and rain ahead of Turkey versus Georgia. So the good folk attending the game risk getting absolutely soaked in Dortmund. The teams are out. So the Turks have gone with Tunic in goal, Mulder, Ekadin, Bardakachi, and Kadioglu. Çalhanoğlu and Ayan in midfield. Güler on the right, Koku is the 10, Yildiz off the left, and Yilmaz up front. That's a really strong front four. Really strong front four. Good double pivot. Not overly sure of the defense. I know Mulder don't know the other three all that well. So curious to see how that goes. Then we have the Georgians, Mamardashvili in goal, Kvartvelia, Kashia, Bali as the centre back, Hakabadadze at right wing back, Titashvili as the left wing back, Chekvedadze, I think that's his name, Koshoroshvili and Mekbishvili, I'm not over in the midfield, and then Mikatadze and Kvaratskhelia up front. So a lot of pressure, obviously, on Ficha to carry the load, but I'd imagine they're going to be very compact, very hardworking. They've got a really good goalkeeper, and they've got a match winner. I think that's a good team. I'm hopeful they do well, and I'm looking forward to seeing Mikatadze alongside him. So yeah, that game kicks off in about 15 minutes. So I'm going to get myself out of here and stop waffling. But before we do, ladies and gentlemen, I know, as you know, one of the great heroes of the Two Footed podcast is Big Duncan Ferguson, and we regularly do Big Dunk Watch. But we're going to have to be introducing a brand new segment to the podcast this coming season, and it's Gobby Cabbage Watch. Robbie Savage has been appointed as the new head coach of Macclesfield by Robbie Savage. Savage had been the director of football at Macclesfield, and now he has decided to promote himself to head coach. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. Now, Macclesfield obviously are a Phoenix club because the original Macclesfield town, which had been founded in 1879, was forced to dissolve in 2020 due to their financial situation. It was horrible to see that football club just kind of disappear, but wonderful to see in its place a new club immediately be brought into existence, and they have worked their way up into the Northern Premier League now, and they have decided in their wisdom that Robbie Savage is the man to take them forward from here, and we'll see how that goes. If they are promoted, they will go into the National League North. If they're promoted from that, they would end up in the National League, which is then obviously one step below League Two. So as things stand, they're in the 7th tier of English football, and I'm hopeful that we can see them establish themselves as a football league club in the years to come. I think it's been really promising how well the fan base has come together and embraced this new venture, and with a bit of luck, we get to see them back in the football league, because, again, what a horrible journey it's been for them. Similar enough, obviously, to what's happened at Bury. Now, Bury, luckily enough, they were allowed to merge back with the Bury AFC were set up as the Phoenix Club for Bury when they went bust. And now they've been allowed to kind of re-merge with that team, but as their original name, so it continues the original history. And maybe in time we see the same thing happen at Macclesfield. The FA would have to approve it. Bury not as high up there in the Northwest Counties Football League. So if they were to win that, I think I'm right in saying they would go into the division below. Yeah, I think they'd go into the division below where Macclesfield are now. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's the same. They win it, they go into the division Macclesfield are in. Yeah, I think it's if they win, they would. No, it is. They're two. If they get promoted, if Bury get promoted this coming season, they'll be the division below the one that Macclesfield are currently in. So they're currently 2 steps behind Macclesfield as both clubs try to, rebuild themselves from the ground up. And look, I'm going to make fun of Robbie Savage, because he's an idiot. But I really want to see the club doing well. So I will be kind of keeping my fingers crossed. There is a really good article I want you all to read. It is on the BBC website. It's written by Emma Smith, and it is about Georgia and their Euros journey. So go and read that one. It's on the BBC football homepage. So, check that one out. Gossip then, and we'll finish. Brighton are closing in on a deal, allegedly, for 22-year-old Dutch winger Crescencio Somerville of Leeds. Ferran Torres is wanted by West Ham this summer, but he does not want to leave Barcelona. Tottenham's bid for Ivan Toney has been rejected by Brentford. Now that, of course, is an exclusive from our friends at Transfer Market. Chief spoofer Steve Kay. Exclusive. He's the only one that knows this bid took place. Crystal Palace will demand a fee of at least 65 million for Mark Wehi this summer. Seems fair. Fenerbahce are interested in Victor Lindelof. We saw that yesterday. That's obviously the Jose link there. Juventus are interested in Jadon Sancho, but can't afford his 40 million price tag. They might have to do a loan with an option to buy. Atletico Madrid have made a move for Conor Gallagher. Gallagher might reject the move to Aston Villa as he's not keen on joining the club. William Estevao passed his medical at Chelsea and is set to sign when he turns 18, but I think that deal is all agreed. Nottingham Forest are finalising a deal for Brazilian goalkeeper Carlos Miguel, who would become the tallest player in the Premier League at 6'8", giant of a human. Manchester City are prepared to go into next season without any new signings unless a player asks to leave. I have doubts. Newcastle are interested in OH Leuven Icelandic winger John Dagur Thorsteinsson. Fikayo Tomori is likely to reject any offer from Newcastle this summer. Mats Hummels is close to signing for Real Mallorca. Interesting. Bob's gone to live there. Maybe they can be neighbours and besties again. West Ham are mulling over whether to push ahead with signing Ryan Sessegnon after he was released by Tottenham. I think that'll be a good signing. Ashley Young is close to agreeing a new deal with Everton. That would not be a good signing. Tottenham were interested in Vanderson. He's really good, and he'd make a lot of sense as the backup to Porro. I'd imagine, though, he'll actually be too expensive to be a backup to Porro. Talks between Borussia Dortmund and Brighton midfielder Pascal Gross are progressing, though no agreement has yet been reached. And there we go, folks. That is the end of today's podcast. Jesus wept. As I mentioned at the start, today's podcast is sponsored by Sky Bet. So check out Sky Bet for all the latest odds. But remember, betting is only for those aged 18 and above. If you are engaged with gambling, please visit begambleaware.org to make yourself more aware. If you've got problems, find out what what path you can take, and how to stay safe and how not to end up losing all your money. But yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.